Let me tell you how the Chisholm Trail came to be. In the beginning, it wasn't much of a trail. The basic ground for it was probably about the mouth of the Grand River where it emptied into the Arkansas. The most prominent branch ran up the Arkansas River as far as Fort Zara, about a mile east of where Great Bend, Kansas, stands now. From there, cattle would go to different army posts: Fort Riley, Fort Harker near Ellsworth, Fort Hays near Hays City, Fort Wallace. They all got cattle from our trail. The main base was in the Arkansas bottom on Chisholm Creek, near where Wichita is now. The trail went on west to Fort Bend and Fort Lyon in Colorado. Among the first herds that started north from Texas was that of Smith and Elliot, and their guide was a gentleman who was formerly a soldier with Robert E. Lee, who had to do with the civilized tribes of the Indian Territory, and used the old military trails, which were supposed to run from Texas to Sedalia, Mo, and cross the Red River at Colbert's. I'm the Chisholm in Chisholm Trail. My mom was Cherokee, and so I used to trade cattle into Indian country. I supplied the government frontier posts with their cattle supply in the early part of the occupation of frontier posts and during the Civil War. Over the years, I drove thousands of cattle into the Pecos country in New Mexico. About the furthest I would go was as far as Fort Scott, Kansas. Later on, Charles Goodnight went the western route up the Pecos into Colorado. He established what they called the Goodnight Trail, or sometimes the Goodnight and Loving Trail. He trailed the Jingle Bobs, that's John Chisholm's cattle, north to Dodge City, Kansas. That became known as the Chisholm Trail, pronounced and spelled differently, but similar enough to cause some confusion with my trail. The first herd to Abilene, as I recall, was driven by J.J. Myers. He's still living in Panhandle, Texas, last I heard. The first cattle shipped out of Abilene were C.C. Slaughters from Dallas. Joe McCoy wrote a book about the trail. The first chapters were in a paper called The Cattle Trail, edited by H.M. Dixon. Dixon's in Chicago now, at the Auditorium Building. That paper was the first to publish maps of the trails. They showed routes from different cattle shipping points in Kansas to where they met the original Chisholm Trail. There was one from Coffeyville, one from Baxter Springs, then Abilene, Newton, Wichita, and Great Bend. Dodge City got so famous they didn't need to map it. Originally, the route itself started in San Antonio, Texas. At the time, that's where we'd gather the herds. From there, we'd head to New Braunfels. Then it was on to San Marcos, where we'd cross the San Marcos River 4 miles below town. Next stop was Austin. We'd cross the Colorado River there, and then the trail wound to the right of Round Rock, then to the right of Georgetown, Salado, then Belton. We'd push on to Old Fort Graham, crossing the Brazos River to the left of Cleburne. The trail went to the right of Fort Worth, just about where Hell's Half Acre used to be, and we would cross the Trinity River. Fort Worth wasn't much back then, just a little burg on the bluff where the panther lay down and died. Past Fort Worth, the trail forked at Bolivar, and we would cross the Red River at Red River Station. Watercourses often served as the only trail markets. Once in Indian Territory, we'd hit Beaver Creek, then Rush Creek, the Little Washita. We'd cross the Washita at Line Creek, then push on to the Canadian River. After many more crossings, we'd reach Caldwell at the Kansas line and along up to Abilene. Some herds went on to Ellsworth from there. Years passed and the trail changed. C.H. Rust from San Angelo tried to map out the whole thing in 1924. He talked to 35 old trail drivers, and put together a detailed account. The old Chisholm cow trail varied in width at river crossings from 50 to 100 yards. In some places it spread out from 1 mile to 2 miles in width. The average drive in a day was 8 to 10 and 12 miles, and the time on the trail was from 60 to 90 days, from points in Texas to Abilene or Newton, or Ellsworth, Kansas. What happened on the old cow trail in those days of long ago is almost forgotten, and it is a sad thought to us today that there is no stone or mile post to mark the old trail's location. The old-time cow puncher that followed the trail, his mount, his makeup, the old trail songs that he sang, what he did and how he did it, is left yet to someone to give him the proper place in history. What he was then and what he is now. I hope to meet him over there in the sweet by and by, where no mavericks or slicks will be tallied. That's the story of the Chisholm Trail as best I can tell it. A lot happened on that trail in the old days. Most of it's forgotten now. But I reckon as long as there are cattle in Texas and railroads in Kansas, folks will remember the old Chisholm Trail.